Be hungry, be curious, and be humble. That's my guest's long-standing mantra that guides him in his work as a public health professional. He joins us on this episode to share his journey and passion for public health. You're listening to the PHEC podcast, episode 397. The field of public health is so broad, overlapping multiple industries. With epidemiology at the core of public health, there are an unlimited number of ways to target specific populations, health conditions, environmental issues, and causes that matter most to you. My name is Dr. Huntley, and I'm the host here on the Public Health Epidemiology Conversations podcast. I'm an epidemiologist, consultant, and entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in healthcare and public health. On this podcast, my guests and I engage in conversations that demonstrate the importance of public health and epidemiology across a variety of industries, helping you think outside the box and inspire greater positive impact in communities around the world. Now, let's dive into the topic of this brand new episode. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this episode. I'm about to introduce you to a public health professional and leader whose mantra for many years has been, be hungry, be curious, and be humble. He's also a returning guest. Now, before I dive in, I would like to introduce myself if you're new to this podcast, or reintroduce myself if you're a returning listener. My name is Dr. Charlotte Huntley, and I lead an epidemiology consulting firm that supports large nonprofit organizations and government agencies that serve Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, commonly referred to as BIPOC communities. We are often invited to support tribal organizations, and we're always humbled and honored to serve. We help our clients collect, analyze, manage, and communicate their data and health information in plain language to the communities they serve. If your organization serves BIPOC communities or is genuinely interested in building relationships with BIPOC communities, then please reach out to us through our website, which is DrCHHuntley.com. We would be happy to meet with you and explore how we might be able to support your organization. The links will be also provided to you in the show notes. Now, I'm really excited to introduce you to my guest on this episode. He has been on this podcast before, in fact, back in episode 248, which was published in the early part of 2022. We often engage with each other on LinkedIn and always see each other in person at the APHA, or American Public Health Association's conference every year. And we always take a selfie. I think he is the master of selfies. He's taken a selfie with so many people. So we even chat about that on this episode in our conversation. It is always nice when you have someone that you engage with online on social media, and then you're able to also engage with them in person. I think that just really helps to enrich that relationship and help you to stay connected across the distance and the time. We had a chance to catch up a bit on work and family, and I'm really excited to have him return to the podcast and share more of his journey with us. So let me formally introduce him, and then I will connect our conversation. Dr. Bryan Buckley is the head of public health at Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield, where he leads Care First strategy for advancing and achieving better health outcomes for the people and communities in Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the Northern Virginia regions. Additionally, Dr. Buckley serves as an assistant professor at Georgetown University. In his role, he teaches, coaches, supports, and supervises graduate students within the School of Medicine and School of Health. He is also a board member of the American Public Health Association, Creating Healthier Communities, the American Heart Association of the Greater Washington, D.C. region, and Food and Friends. Let's connect my conversation with Dr. Buckley right now. Hi, Bryan. How are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you for having me.
I'm good. We were chatting a little bit before I hit record. It's really nice to see you again. I think we crossed each other at the last conference. I would see you at a distance. I don't think we got a chance
like
to
a half second. Yeah.
We didn't get the infamous selfie, I don't think, from that
No,
last call.
we did get the infamous selfie.
Did I grab? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I grabbed you just as you were leaving.
Yes.
That's right. I got you. Well, it is really good to see you. Of course, we've had you on the podcast a long time ago. I've got to look up exactly what episode that was, but so much has happened since then. So I'm really, really looking forward to our conversation, catching up, seeing how you're doing. But for the record, for people who may not know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Yeah, sure. So, Dr. Bryan Buckley, currently professionally, the people that pay my bills, I'm the head of public health for Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is one of the Care First companies across the banner of Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. And so I oversee our enterprise health equity strategy across Care First, our 3.5 million members across Maryland, DC, and Northern Virginia, and a couple national accounts, and also work on public health alignment across the organization. But I have so many different identities. I'm also a pracademic. And so I'm also on faculty as an assistant professor at Georgetown, both at the School of Medicine and also at the School of Health. And I think most people know me from my public health side of the house. Also on the board for the American Public Health Association and so many other boards and working groups. So that's who I am.
It's a wonderful introduction. And I'm going to jump in and ask a million questions just about the little bit that you shared just now, but there will be time. It's going to be a good conversation. I would love to have you roll back a bit because as rich as that introduction is, I'm sure you did not, oh, maybe you did start as a child saying, this is what I want to do when I get to this stage in my life. But curious to know, at what point did you first learn about public health or consider public health as a career?
So interesting, and this might be surprising for a lot of people to hear sometimes, but I kind of came into public health by accident. So it wasn't like, to your point, as a wee child, I didn't say, hey, I want to be a public health person. Shoot, at the time, I was really kind of like, I don't know if I want to do anything health related. Actually, my very first career at high school was I wanted to be an architect, actually. I was this idea of being able to create something from scratch. As that timing was bad timing to be architect, given the financial turns and the recession that was happening around that time. So I was like, oh, what's the next best thing? And so I actually started off in microbiology and molecular genetics for my undergrad. And my goal at the time was to do research in microbiology or be a lab tech. And then I actually had an amazing professor that actually pulled me aside and saw some those people that see something in you that you didn't see in yourself. She was like, not that microbiology is a bad thing, but like a lot of us are very introverted. Not saying all microbiologists are introverted, but she's like, you have something special and I've seen you doing other things. Like we could use really people like you in the public health field. And so she encouraged me to take a public health class when I was an undergrad. It was part of my major. And I ended up falling in love with it. And that was like, I think my junior year. And then just steep myself in all things public health.
Oh, that's wonderful. I don't think I knew that about your microbiology, start, because, that was how I started with microbiology in the lab. And it is definitely the place for introverts. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm home here. This is it. I don't need to be
like, I was that person that was going to each lab table, like, hey, how's your experiment doing? And they're like, okay, this guy, he got too much energy right here. We need to get him out there, convincing other people while I work.
We didn't want to have conversations. You just sit there and read the plates and do the stuff. And it's a perfect spot. Oh, that's really interesting though. I can see that. And I'm really grateful for those types of leaders that can spot something in someone and just kind of shed the light or share that there's this opportunity. I know a lot of people like that, and we need people like that across our walks and our paths and for our kids and those people that kind of shed the light and share the direction. Is there a particular problem or population or public health issue that you are most passionate about now?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know if I have like a specific issue. I feel like I have a portfolio of issues. And maybe I'll go back a little bit. Just the other day, I was talking to someone as they were building their application for a doctoral studies. They were like, hey, what was the vision you saw for yourself on like what problem you wanted to solve after graduation? And for me, it had always been, how do I bridge, the intersection between public health and healthcare? And really this idea of really this public-private partnership concept because it involves a lot of different things. And I've kind of applied that same kind of viewpoint to a lot of different issues, whether it's my doctoral work, whether it's the work I'm doing here at Care First. It's really how do we work together across industries to actually build up the collective impact that we all want to make. And so I think that's where I would say my root issue is like the problem I see. And I try to bring my full life experience into trying to solve that problem.
I can really appreciate that. I remember, oh gosh, I can't remember exactly when this was. I was somewhere along my early journey with public health education. It's like early part of my master's. I remember reading or having discussion, but there was this like awareness that this is healthcare and this is public health. They definitely are stronger together than they, operate together. But I remember thinking like, well, why aren't they really working together more? I remember feeling that. And I just kind of like tucked it in the back of my mind. But so I definitely understand what you're saying. And I think lately I've been talking a lot about this power of this interdisciplinary professional. So when you've got public health doctor and any other like skill set or degree or expertise, you bring that together, that's really strong because of how broad public health is. And then vice versa, if you've got medical healthcare professionals, like a medical doctor or pharmacist, and then they come in with and add a public health degree, how powerful that is, that synergy. But it is definitely the ongoing process. It's the evolution in your discovering as you continue to blend, discovering more. But you do see things from a very unique perspective when you kind of bring both of those lenses into any problem or issue or situation. So I can really appreciate that. I'm thinking now about, we were talking about updates, and I remember when you shared pictures of if you're a new baby, because you're now proud father. So when you were on a podcast before, you did not have children. Now you have
children. No.
They change things, don't they?
They do change things. Yeah.
I laugh because my children are adults and I have grandchildren now, which is like a whole different experience. But they do shape how we view things and how we approach our work. I know that was the case for me throughout my entire career. And then even now at this different, phase of life, it's continuing to be a part of that. It shapes my actions and really responses to things. So I'm curious, how has that, fatherhood really shifted or changed your perspective or how you do what you do?
And it shifted it quite a lot. So, and just by background, some people know this about me. So I'm not a big person on New Year's, like January New Year's, like everyone doing their New Year's goals. I base it off of my birthday, which is in July. So my New Year starts around my birthday. And I remember going into one of my birthdays, not this past one, but the one before, I theme each birthday. And that theme was fatherhood as I was entering into this new phase of fatherhood where my son was going to be born he's actually 2 weeks away from me for my birthday. And I think it really made me start thinking about things a little bit differently. The deep responsibility we all have to each other. I've told people this before. I started thinking about future people and really that there are more future people than there are current people right now and people that have ever existed. And with that thinking, the deep responsibility we have to build the building blocks of the future. And it really made me start thinking about what type of father I want to be, what type of life I want to have. Fatherhood impacted every facet of how I thought about how I showed up in the world, even to building to career changes. I was realizing in my last job, I was traveling a lot. It was fun. Everyone loves to travel. And then at one point, when I became a father, I was like, man, I'm missing my kid. I need something that can have me be more present for him because although I can do really great things, I want to also be there for him and be able to mold him because I know there's such a deep responsibility for the future. He has to learn all this public health knowledge because remember, all things are public health. And everyone is part of public health. They just don't know it yet. And so how can I embed these principles into him and show him what it looks like? Because when you work at such a national level, sometimes you can get lost in the bureaucracy of things. And so that kind of inspired me to come to Care First in many ways. I wanted to be with the organization that was locally involved in the community. And I can take my son to events and say, hey, this is what it looks like to show up for people. And so, as I said, fatherhood has made me think about things so much different. I think about my time differently. Even this idea that my team knows between 5 and 8, Brian's not answering his phone at all because he is playing with his kid. And I'll work on stuff after 8 if I need to. I'll stay up as late as I need to get the work done. But there's a sacredness in that time because you know that time, you don't get it back. And those early building blocks of kids definitely shape their whole entire reality for the future. So fatherhood's been like an amazing journey for me. And I do get more inspired every time I get excited now for the end of the day because I'm like, oh, I get to pick him up and like see that big smile of his. You know, I did hear that smile doesn't stay forever, but at least for now, I get to get really excited about that.
That's really nice, Bryan. Thank you for sharing that. And I think in a lot of ways, I'm listening to you, and I think that, your perspective as a father is really, you're thinking about your child, right? But you're also thinking about, it aligns with this population, this community kind of aspect, right? The work that we do is so much bigger than just us as an individual professional. It impacts so many other people. So you think about, your children, next generation of people. I think quite a bit about that. And I guess, over time and experiences, you have more to reflect on. But I'll share a story that I guess if I were to rethink my word of the year, it could easily be community, because I have a different word for the year. I always have a theme, like this is my word to kind of help me stay focused, right? But we're doing so much work on the community through my business this year and through how we're going to really we're building a platform for our podcast listeners as a community. So by the time this episode is aired, that'll be more formed. We're literally creating that right now. That's a big target for me this year. Really, really passionate about that. And then on another arm here, I'm working on another community. You're really targeting a very specific population. So this sense of bringing people together, because I know that the work that I do, as exhausting as it feels, especially right now in the climate that we're in, and we'll speak to that a little bit more, but I need to have something that gets me showing up every day, and to get up when I feel like I've been knocked down, to get up and keep going. It's not that the individual person has to solve everything. I just feel like this is a calling and this is a work. So it has to be something bigger than me to keep me going. So when I think about community, I think about who I'm serving or who I feel led to be a part of building and bringing together and pulling together. And maybe it started, with me as a parent, because I had to be so focused on those, I had 3 little ones, at 3 years apart, and then the 5-year apart for the youngest. But, that does start to shift you, but then it spills over into everything else that you do. So even, at the time we're recording this is right in this transition of the new political administration here in the United States. And it has gotten us like turned inside out. There's no other way to describe it. It's very draining. And so in feeling, trying to work to keep my own balance internally and into perspective, right, and not losing sense, I remember I took a day and just kind of had to step back from everything, and just enough to kind of reset. And in that time, I learned about a neighbor who was dealing with a tragedy. And it was at the same time I was dealing with a tragedy. We had a loss, but I didn't know at the time she was going through all that. So when I found out what she had been going through, she basically is surviving an aneurysm. I thought, oh my goodness, this is a neighbor that I used to walk past every morning during our walks. We'd, wave and keep going. So I went over and I want to share my number with you. I'm usually working from my home like 3 days a week. If you need anything, like I'm right here, because now she's balance and mobility is kind of a challenge. And it's just that sense of community. And it's like, I am thinking about, my public health lens is on everything. So I'm thinking about the challenges now. Like she can't drive herself. Her husband has to work. She doesn't have family right here. And I'm just thinking about how challenging it might be for her, not just physically, but mentally, and just all the things that she's going through. And I just wanted to like be there and be a resource. And she was like so appreciative. She said, if you don't mind walking at a really slow pace, I would love to be able to have a walking partner because I can't walk by myself. So I told her, we've got a deal. Now, of course, I've got a couple of weeks of travel ahead. I said, as soon as I get back in town, I'm going to text you and we're going to set up a schedule because you're going to help me get out and walk during the middle of the day. And I'm going to help you. And I'm sharing this long story because it was that, this is like bigger than me. It was outside of me and what I'm dealing with. It was someone else. And I wanted to be there for them, which is like how we are in public health, right? And so this gives an opportunity for, us to bond and I'm serving. And despite everything else that's going on, this is something that I can pour into my neighbor. It helps her. Who knows where this goes, right? But it's those little things that I get reminded of that kind of refuel me a little bit in the middle of this kind of chaos that I feel like we're navigating.
Yeah, that's so nice. And I like the idea of community. And I think even as we talk about public health, because we're all in the business of improving health and well-being, and you have to remember social well-being is a key piece of that. How do we see each other? And we know from the research, even the idea of gratitude or being able to gift or of your time, your talents, or your treasure has a positive impact on your health. And so it's really nice that you're able to do that for your neighbor, because I think that's something we all need to get back to. How do we see ourselves and everybody as neighbors?
Yeah, exactly. And it feels very much one bite at a time, one step at a time, one bit at a time. If we can just recenter, reset a bit, and remember that we really have to take care of ourselves. So sometimes taking care of ourselves is like, if you're giving, like you're just saying, giving out to someone else, helping someone else kind of get that feeling, that response back. Or maybe it's just that walk that you take by yourself.
I often tell, so, through my, whether it be Georgetown or just colleagues, being in public health, I always tell people is not necessarily always easy. I can honestly think, I don't know there's any administration that I've ever seen that, like, public health, we're like, yeah, we're rocking it. Like, a lot of times, we're all ice skating uphill. And the ice skating uphill is because we know it's necessary work that we need to do, not just for ourselves, but for our communities. So even as I was telling you about like my word or phrase for each birthday, fatherhood was the first one this past July. It's kind of I didn't even know this was going to be the thing that was going to define my year. The theme phrase was good trouble. And it's, the John Lewis quote, you remember, do not be lost in a sea of despair. For this is not just a moment for a day or week or a month. It's the moment of a lifetime that we really have to really cause some good trouble, some necessary trouble. And so I started to think a lot back to that. And I was telling everyone, because I make it like a thing where I'm like, hey guys, I'm looking to cause some good trouble with my community, because I think we know this is necessary trouble that we need to cause, not for our sakes, but for the communities that we serve.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that a lot, actually. That's a really good perspective, too. Very timely. My word for this year is expansive. And I was thinking, ooh, taking this real seriously. I'm really stretching. We're only a few weeks in. But yeah, I like that. Good trouble. That's really good, Bryan.
At the time we're recording this, and I'm sure by the time it comes out, and even furthermore over the next couple of years, we're all going to feel a moment of, a lot of anxiety. It's also important for us as public health to, as you mentioned, step back when we need to. I always think about, the idea, put your mask on first before you can start helping others. And this work is hard, and it can be traumatizing actually doing it, depending on what facet of public health you're in. It can be very exhausted. My wife is a clinical social worker, and so I get to kind of see this in a different light. And, whether you're working with one person or working with like populations of people, it can be exhausting. And so take the time people need, but also find the things that give you joy and find that community, because this work isn't done just by yourself. Like, for those that know me, my whole mantra is like, be hungry, be curious, be humble. But that last part of being humble, it's not just about you, but knowing that you're part of a community, a justice league, of a group of people that actually have to do this work together. And so that's what gives me a lot of good joy. And the pendulum always swings, and it's always swinging. And so
Right.
my thing is, I'm looking at this as an opportunity to rethink, reframe, and reflect as we think about what's the new way we have to message, because to some degree, we as a group, as a civilization, have to ask ourselves, have we been communicating why that we are actually in community, and how does it look like when we bring people into that? And so maybe it's the entrepreneurial side of myself. My mother would say it's only a failure if you learn nothing from it. So what are we learning from this? And how do we reframe fail as figuring out answers and implementing lessons learned? Because that's going to be the stickiness that actually allows us to progress this work even more moving forward in the future.
That's really good. I like that a lot. I think that it's a great reminder for where we are right now, because we do have this stretch of time. There's the opportunity to learn, to re-envision, to improve. And I think that this perspective offers a bit of hope. It's a very positive way of looking ahead. And like you said, with every administration change, it's not that, oh my gosh, it's going to be easy peasy if it had been a different outcome. It's just it's a change. It's something different. I feel like, I don't know all the details, but I feel like deep down, we will be okay. It may feel like the absolute end, but we will thrive.
And I guess one thing that kind of gives me like some solace sometimes over the past 5-6 years, I've been doing a lot of reflection, interviewing a lot of people from my past, even during COVID, interviewing my grandfather. And, when you start hearing these stories about what they had to go through, I also have to remind myself that I'm also in a very privileged state where I can still have those moments of resiliency, because we have to remember we lived in a time in U.S. history where just even by standing up, could be a death sentence. And so it encourages me that, I think of my ancestors and what they had to go through. Like, how do I kind of channel that resilience, channel that optimism, channel, that strategy, that North Star that, we all collectively are trying to get to.
That's good too. I found myself doing that as well. My mother was absolutely a trailblazer, and my father and my grandfather did a lot of work, civil rights activists back in the day, and had hear great stories, and I read a lot of what they've done. And I feel like, all of that's like flowing through my veins, and that energy surrounds me. And, don't get me wrong, I get disappointed. I feel down, and I felt very depleted a few days ago. But, I think that just reminds me that I'm still in this, because we can feel all ways. You can feel kind of kicked around and knocked down, but it's just kind of, what do we do next? And I allow myself to kind of fall all out and have a meltdown. But then, the timer clicks, and I have to kind of, okay, I'll give myself a period of time to do that. And then I've got to get back up and, keep moving. So anyway, these are trying times, but we will learn, we will grow, we will improve. And I look forward to the next time you and I have an update on the podcast and reflect back to this point, and we can talk about all the things that we learned and how we progress. So that'll be another thing to look forward to. One more question, and then we can wrap up. I'm just curious, because I teased you about this before we started recording. I was like, how many hundreds of selfies? I know that I saw, and there's some really fascinating, I know there's got to be stories. The one that I'm really curious about is, and I think I've seen at least 2, but there's maybe more, with you and Dr. Fauci. So I would love to know about your interactions with him, because I think you've had 2 sets of events where I remember seeing you, the 2 of you in photos and so forth. Because I think of him as someone that he was very grounding, I guess, is kind of how I think of his presence in the early part of the last administration going through this cycle. How has your interactions with him been? What's that been like?
Yeah, it's been interesting. So it's funny. This is probably from the last recent one that you probably saw, probably the 4th time I've actually had to interact with him. Weirdly enough, there was 2 times actually virtually. So many people might remember Dr. Fauci was very liberal with his time during the pandemic, talking to every group. And I was working on like a Ward 8 kind of group, and he dialed in. And, it's always so weird when, wow, and so I got to see that. And then the first time getting to meet him in person was actually by accident. I just happened to be up in Boston for a recording of The Future of Public Health. I'm recording through Harvard T.H. Chan, and I had an old mentor that was like, hey, I'm actually going to this Fauci event. Do you want to come with me? And I was able to kind of get to hear him, and that it's been interesting to hear him in this most recent time. As you might know, he's on faculty at Georgetown. And so he's been very, very generous with his time across faculty to really pass on those lessons learned. And my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Christopher King, the Dean of the School of Health at Georgetown, got to do a fireside chat with him. And I think some of the pieces that when I was talking earlier about this idea of resiliency, and he talked a lot about the emotional side of how you think about this work. I mean, he's mentioned it several times, going to the White House and knowing that, hey, you might have to speak truth to power and be okay with having to feel the ramifications, because it's not just about appeasing one person's viewpoint. It's about what is good for the collective. And I think that has been something that has been very encouraging during his reflection. And I got to chat with him for a little bit when he was kind of talking to the students. He's very passionate about students and being able to pass on this stuff, this idea of what's his next thing. And so he just recently wrote a book, and he's like, I think I want to write another book. And so it was just really kind of cool just to have those, remembering that these people that are really awesome and amazing, they're also just people too.
Yeah.
Have emotions, that have families. Even as there was one student that asked a question like, hey, how can I be like you? Like, I want work-life balance, but I also want to be like you. And he was like, hey, I may not be the best person to give you that advice. I was very fortunate to have an amazing family structure that like supported me. And I think that's something that I always think that all students should really add. Like, what's the contribution that you want to add to public health? Not everyone's going to be the CEO. Not everyone's going to lead the stuff. Because as I said, it takes work and energy. How do you want to show up? But knowing that each and every person has a role within the story of public health, it's just them finding out how they want to contribute to it. And so I think it was really fun to hang out with him, get my selfie with him again, a couple of candidates. But it has been really fun, not just with Dr. Fauci, but so many people that have inspired me actually across my lifetime that I've gotten the chance to get selfies with. I had a friend that said a selfie is proof that you met someone and you can remember their essence in that photo. So yeah, even with Paul Farmer, like that was actually one of my greatest selfies that I really enjoyed, because that actually got me into thinking more population health with his book Mountains Beyond Mountains, and getting to meet him in real life was just like amazing. Yeah. I think it's the only fan moment I ever had with anybody, truly.
That's really good. I like that you do that. I really always smile when I see your posts scroll through on social media, and I really admire the work that you're doing. I admire how you show up. It's really so encouraging, and we need you to keep being, doing what you're doing. Don't hold back. Keep showing up and sharing that with everyone. I think it really matters if people don't, tell you that or not, but it really makes a big impact. So keep doing it. We're going to wrap up because I appreciate how generous you have been with your time. We've kind of veered off one side or the other, but I view this as an opportunity for us to catch up. Everyone else gets to listen in on it. I'm going to tell everyone shortly how to connect with you and find you. And also the previous episode, I think it'd be great to hear that one and then hear this one and see how much has changed. But thank you so much for taking time and being here. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you for the invite.
Absolutely. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as we did. Dr. Buckley is a true leader and innovator and is having a big positive impact on all of the communities that he serves. If you're not already connected with him, then I really encourage you to do so. You can connect with him, learn more about the work that he's doing. You can find the links to connect with him on the show notes page. The show notes page for this episode, which is episode 397, can be found at phecpodcast.com. And once you're there, just navigate to episode 397 to find its show notes. You'll also find a quick link to that previous episode with Dr. Buckley so that you can hear both of them. One more thing before we go. Please take a moment and share this episode with a friend. I'm sure you know someone or several people who would be interested in hearing this conversation. If you're listening in one of the podcast apps, you can easily share this episode through a text or directly to social media. And if you are on our show notes page, just scroll to the bottom. You'll find social media sharing buttons, which make it really easy for you to share this episode with your network. All right, everyone. Until next time, have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for listening to the Public Health Epidemiology Conversations podcast. Visit phecpodcast.com to find the show notes for each episode and to learn how to work with me.